It is November 1994, and the road into the northeastern Indian hills is a sequence of sharp turns and absolute isolation. Eleanor Hargrove arrives here under the cover of a researcher. Her official goal is to process the mundane paperwork of a family inheritance, but her true focus is the academic documentation of local folklore. Reaching the property requires a 20-minute solitary hike up a mountain path through an old-growth forest that hasn't been thinned or managed in decades. Eleanor relies on her academic detachment as a shield. She categorizes, she documents, and she observes, maintaining an intellectual distance that she believes makes her safe. But that logic is a core defense against an environment that refuses to behave according to the rules of science. The trees eventually give way to an elevated plateau. To the left sits the farmhouse, a heavy stone structure, half swallowed by moss and 3 decades of silence.
But the house is not the primary feature of this landscape. Eleanor's attention is pulled immediately toward the eastern slope. The orchard is a biological impossibility. Apple and pear trees have reached a size that contradicts the altitude and the soil type, their branches interlocking into a single, massive entity. Underneath the canopy, the atmosphere changes. No light reaches the ground, even at midday. The fruit hanging from the branches is unnaturally vibrant, catching the eye with a perfection that feels designed rather than grown. The physical laws of this hillside have been distorted. Eleanor has walked into a trap that has been maturing for 30 years, and her logic is already beginning to fail her. Inside, the farmhouse is a vault of cold air and stone. Every room carries the scent of long disuse. Eleanor ignores the rest of the house. Guided by a single fragmentary note from her grandmother's records, she moves through the shadows with a very specific destination. In the kitchen, she finds the hearth. She presses the loose stone behind the skirting board, exactly where the note said it would be. Behind the stone is a leather-bound diary, its wax seal still intact after 30 years. The cover bears a clear, handwritten directive, for whoever comes next. This diary wasn't left behind by accident. Catherine Hargrove intentionally archived her history here, creating a targeted generational warning for the person she knew would eventually come to claim this land. As the afternoon light fades, Eleanor sits at the kitchen table and begins to read. The entries detail a history of crushing shame. Catherine blames herself for the death of her husband, Edmund, believing her own fear led the soldiers directly to him. Catherine discovered that the orchard she planted was parasitic. The root system doesn't seek water, it seeks the weight of whispered secrets. For 15 years, the ground consumed her daily confessions of guilt, accelerating its growth on a diet of human shame. The supernatural threat is a relationship. The land didn't just grow, it fed. It transformed a woman's isolated grief into physical mass, creating an anomaly that expands in direct proportion to the weight of the things we hide. Eleanor's first instinct is to categorize. She retreats into her research notebook, trying to force the horror into a framework she can control. She fills the pages with terms like memorial landscape trauma and shame transference mythology. By labeling the orchard as a folklore phenomenon, she can treat it as a case study rather than a physical reality sitting outside her door. But an intellectual diagnosis offers no safety. The mechanics Catherine described are active, and they are entirely indifferent to academic terminology. Eleanor looks up from her notes. Outside the kitchen window, the orchard is a wall of total shadow, looming over the house. She has a history of her own. For 4 years, Eleanor has carried the unspoken guilt of her sister Isabel's death, a secret she has never shared, and one she has never forgiven herself for. The orchard's root system reacts to that silence. After 30 years without a source of energy, the ground is beginning to pull on the specific, heavy shape of the secret Eleanor is hiding within herself. Panic finally breaks her detachment. She packs her gear in minutes and flees the plateau, driving through the night toward the airport and a flight back to Britain. She thinks she's escaped, but the folklore is absolute. You cannot outrun a landscape that recognizes your shame as its own. The orchard doesn't need to follow her. It has already marked her, and it will wait for the inevitable day she is forced to return.